The Young and the Restless spoilers full next week. December 29th to January 9 to 0 to 5. Noah Newman found himself standing at the edge of a fear he had spent his entire life running from, a fear far more devastating than scandal or public judgment. With Sienna Bacall still missing, uncertainty became a living presence that followed him through every corner of Genoa City. Each passing hour without answers intensified the guilt already crushing his chest. Because Noah understood something few dared to say aloud. The disappearance was not random. And his own choices had helped set the stage for whatever nightmare was unfolding. The silence surrounding Sienna was not simply absence, it was accusation. In that void, Noah's carefully constructed sense of self unraveled, exposing the fragility beneath the Newman name. He had always believed he could manage consequences, that mistakes could be contained and repaired, but now he was forced to confront the most unbearable possibility that Sienna might never return, and that the truth would leave him with nothing to salvage. While Noah spiraled inward, Nick Newman shifted into survival mode, operating with the precision of a man who had learned long ago that emotional chaos required strategic deception. His focus turned sharply toward Matt Clark, the man now known by another name, Mitch Bacall, whose involvement in the broader web of manipulation had become impossible to ignore. Nick understood that brute force or direct confrontation would only empower someone like Mitch. Instead, he chose misdirection, presenting half-truths and calculated vulnerabilities, baiting Mitch into believing he held the upper hand. Nick's objective was not simply to rescue Sienna or protect Noah, but to dismantle the illusion of control Mitch relied on. By feeding him just enough information to encourage overconfidence, Nick aimed to expose the cracks in Mitch's story, betting that arrogance would do what interrogation could not. This delicate game of deception mirrored a far larger power struggle unfolding elsewhere in Genoa City, where alliances were being tested not by emotion, but by ambition. Jack Abbott stood at the center of that storm, grappling with a decision that threatened to redefine both his legacy and his moral compass. His desire to finally defeat Victor Newman was not driven by petty rivalry, but by years of calculated sabotage and jabot, wounds that had never fully healed. And yet, the path toward victory ran directly through Phyllis Summers, a woman whose brilliance was matched only by her capacity for chaos. Jack wanted to trust her. In many ways, he needed to. But history loomed large, filled with betrayals, schemes, and moments when Phyllis had chosen herself over everyone else. Phyllis presented her terms with unsettling calm. She claimed she would cooperate with the Abbott family's efforts, but only if Jack agreed to hand control of Marchetti to Summer Newman. On the surface, the request appeared altruistic, almost selfless, which immediately triggered Jack's suspicion. He knew Phyllis too well to believe she wanted nothing in return. Her entire identity had been forged in pursuit of advantage, recognition, and power. The absence of a visible payoff disturbed him far more than any overt demand would have. Jack sensed that the true cost of her cooperation remained hidden, waiting to reveal itself at the most inconvenient moment. What made the situation even more dangerous was the question of the AI program itself. If Phyllis truly succeeded in stealing the technology back, could anyone realistically believe she would simply hand it over? She had already told Jack that her intention was to use the software to take over Newman Enterprises, a claim she delivered with a confidence that bordered on sincerity. Even more troubling was the fact that she had made similar promises to Kane Ashby, suggesting that her ultimate plan might involve playing both sides until one emerged victorious. Phyllis thrived in gray areas, where loyalty was fluid and truth was a tool rather than a principle. Jack found himself torn between desire and restraint. Part of him longed to accept Phyllis's proposal, especially given Victor's relentless attempts to undermine Jabot over the years. The temptation to finally strike back using Victor's own tactics was powerful. Yet another part of Jack recoiled at the hypocrisy such a move would represent. He had spent years positioning himself as the moral counterweight to Victor's ruthlessness, the man who believed in limits even when power was within reach. To ally himself with Phyllis, knowing her history, would mean abandoning that stance entirely. Jack claimed he wanted nothing more than to end the madness consuming Genoa City, but he also knew that partnering with Red risked becoming exactly the kind of man he despised. As these corporate and personal battles unfolded, Noah's crisis deepened. The longer Sienna remained missing, the more unforgiving public opinion became. Whispers spread, some expressing concern, others revealing a chilling indifference. Many fans of Genoa City's unspoken social order seemed disturbingly comfortable with the idea that Sienna might never return, as though her disappearance simplified a narrative they were eager to erase. For Noah, this realization was almost as devastating as the loss itself. He saw clearly how disposable people became when they complicated powerful families or inconvenient relationships. The knowledge hollowed him out, leaving behind a man who no longer recognized his place in the world that had shaped him. Nick's deception of Mitch continued to unfold in parallel, each move designed to draw the man closer to exposure. Nick understood that time was the enemy, and that every delay increased the risk to Sienna and to Noah's already fractured future. He masked urgency behind calculated patience, presenting himself as negotiable, even compromised, while quietly steering Mitch toward mistakes. It was a dangerous gamble, one that echoed countless Newman family battles before it, where victory often came at a personal cost no one anticipated. Phyllis, meanwhile, remained the wild card no one could fully read. Her conversations with Jack were layered with sincerity and manipulation, conviction and opportunism. She spoke of justice and balance, of ending Victor's reign of terror over competing empires, yet her eyes betrayed something else: a hunger for transformation, for reshaping the board so that she, once again, stood at the center of the game. Whether she genuinely believed her own rhetoric or simply understood how to sell it remained unclear. What was certain was that her involvement ensured chaos, regardless of which side ultimately prevailed. As Genoa City held its breath, each storyline converged around a shared theme: fear. Noah feared irreparable loss. Nick feared failure. Jack feared becoming the very thing he opposed. And Phyllis feared nothing at all, which made her the most dangerous player of them all. Time, as Jack himself acknowledged, would ultimately reveal the truth. But in a world where secrets moved faster than justice and power often outran conscience, the question was not merely who would win, but what would be left of them when the battle finally ended. Noah didn't need another anonymous tip or another half-confirmed rumor to know what his gut had been screaming since the first hour Sienna vanished. He understood coldly, painfully, that Matt Clark was the one holding her, and that made everything else in Genoa City feel suddenly smaller, almost irrelevant, compared to the single, brutal truth that Sienna had become a hostage inside a man's private war against the Newman name. Noah's fear wasn't only about losing the woman he loved. It was the deeper terror of realizing she could be turned into collateral damage, an innocent body used to send a message. A bargaining chip meant to punish a family that Matt believed owed him blood, fortune, and recognition. Every thought Noah had tried to bury, every compromise, every lie, every moment he'd convinced himself that he could live into worlds came roaring back as a kind of punishment. If Sienna suffered, Noah wouldn't be able to blame fate. He would have to blame the kind of man he had been when he thought secrets were safer than honesty, when he thought consequences could be negotiated. Now he was learning that the only currency Matt respected was pain. That was why Nick moved quickly, but not openly. He knew this wasn't a situation that could be solved by threatening the wrong man in the wrong room. Matt fed off resistance, not worshiped the feeling of being chased. So Nick chose a different stage, a public park, daytime, open-air environment that looked harmless to any passerby, but felt like a chessboard to men who understood power. Nick arrived with a posture that suggested calm, the kind that implied he had already decided the outcome and was merely showing up to finalize terms. He didn't come to plead. He didn't come to beg. He came to tempt. And he did it with the one thing a broke man like Matt could never stop hearing in his head: money. Nick hinted that there might be a reward, not a bribe like a criminal would offer, but a payoff wrapped in legality and ego, something Matt could frame as victory instead of surrender. The second Nick dangled it, he saw the shift in Matt's eyes. Bankruptcy did not just empty a man's accounts. It hollowed out his pride. It made every humiliation sting louder. Matt leaned in it physically, but psychologically, for a split second he saw his life returning to him in the form of a check, a settlement, a slice of the Newman world that he could finally touch. But Matt wasn't stupid, and he wasn't merely desperate. He listened with a smile that was almost grateful, then turned that smile into a knife. He pushed back, reminding Nick subtly at first, then with a sharper edge that Nick was not the one holding the cards. The park suddenly felt less like neutral territory and more like a cage made of sunlight, because the threat wasn't spoken, it was implied. Matt didn't have to say Sienna's name to make her presence bleed into the conversation. He didn't have to describe what he could do, because Nick's imagination, fueled by Noah's panic and the weight of his own parental instincts, did that work for him. Matt let Nick feel the truth that tormented Noah, that Sienna could be harmed not because she mattered to Matt, but because she mattered to them. That was what made her useful. That was what made the situation intolerable. Nick tried to test Matt's confidence, to provoke a slip, to lure him into revealing too much where she was. Who was helping? What the next step would Bobby? Matt deflected each attempt with a calm that felt rehearsed, the calm of someone who had waited a long time to feel powerful over a Newman. Then Matt delivered the line that shifted the air between them from negotiation to war. He was the one in control. And Nick would learn that control doesn't come from wealth or reputation, it comes from leverage. And leverage comes from fear. Nick held his composure, but inside him something tightened. He could feel the trap forming, the way every move he made could either save Sienna or push Matt into doing something irreversible out of spite. The danger in Matt wasn't only his cruelty. It was his craving to prove that he could make the Newman family bend. Men like Matt didn't just want money. They wanted humiliation. They wanted the moment they could replay forever, the moment a powerful family finally had to look at them and admit they were not untouchable. Nick realized, standing there in a place full of ordinary people living ordinary lives, that the most frightening thing about Matt was how little he seemed to care about consequences. Bankruptcy had stripped him down to resentment and ambition, and that combination could make a man reckless enough to burn everything just to watch the smoke rise. And that was how the park meeting ended, not with a deal, not with a confession, not with relief, but with a promise of violence disguised as confidence. Nick walked away knowing he had not bought time. He had only confirmed to Matt that the bait worked, that the Newman family was vulnerable, that Sienna's disappearance could move them like puppets. Meanwhile, Noah remained trapped in the worst kind of helplessness, the kind where every instinct screams to act, but every action could make things worse. He understood now that Matt's war wasn't about winning a fortune, it was about breaking a family from the inside, forcing them into choices that would haunt them forever. Somewhere, Sienna was still missing, and the longer she stayed missing, the more likely it became that her return, if it happened at all, would come with a cost that no amount of Newman money could erase. What happens next is the kind of storyline Genoa City was built for, a brutal collision between a father trying to outsmart a predator, a son drowning in guilt, and an enemy who believes pain is the only language the Newmans truly understand. The showdown between Nick and Matt is coming, and it won't be polite, it won't be clean, and it won't end with everyone walking away unchanged, because when a man like Matt says he holds the power, he's daring the Newmans to prove him wrong, and the proof may require them to cross lines they swore they would never cross. Noah's fear stops being an emotion and becomes a constant state, because now he isn't just waiting for news, he is waiting for the moment his own choices come back to punish someone else. He moves through Genoa City like a man haunted, scanning every familiar street as if the city itself might suddenly confess where Sienna is being kept. The worst part is that he can feel the trap tightening even when nothing happens. Every minute of silence tells him Matt has time, control, and patience. And that means Sienna's life is being measured out in increments Noah cannot buy back. His mind keeps circling the same brutal thought. Sienna didn't choose the Newman war. She didn't ask to become a bargaining chip. Yet she is the one paying the price for the family name stamped on Noah's blood. That truth breaks him in private and then forces him to stand up again in public, Because in Genoa City, weakness is never just weakness. It is an invitation. Sharon senses it long before Noah admits it. She reads the way he avoids eye contact, the way he jumps at messages, the way he speaks like every sentence is a risk. She doesn't need proof to know something is terribly wrong. And Nick doesn't need to say it out loud for Sharon to understand that their son is being dragged toward a cliff by forces larger than impulse or romance. For Nick, the terror is more complex. He isn't only fighting to save Sienna. He is fighting to stop Noah from doing something irreversible, because desperate sons make desperate decisions. And Nick has lived long enough to know that a single reckless move can destroy a family more efficiently than any enemy ever could. Nick's mistake in the park wasn't that he offered a reward. It was that he allowed Matt Clark-Mitch Bacall, whatever name he wants to wear, to feel the thrill of dominance. That is why Nick's next strategy is colder, sharper, and more dangerous. He stops trying to buy Matt and starts trying to fracture him. Nick begins pulling at the threads of Matt's ego and isolation, because men like Matt are never truly alone. They are surrounded by opportunists, assistants, intermediaries, and hangers-on who will sell them out the moment fear outweighs loyalty. Nick doesn't need Matt to confess. He needs someone near Matt to panic. He quietly spreads the idea that the Newman machine is already closing in, not through threats, but through controlled leaks, subtle pressure points that make it seem like law enforcement interest is growing, like financial scrutiny is turning into a net, like the walls are quietly moving inward. He knows Matt's greatest vulnerability isn't prison, it's humiliation. Bankruptcy didn't just empty Matt's accounts, it shattered his self-image, and a man whose pride has been shattered will do anything to prove he still matters. Nick weaponizes that, nudging Matt toward a choice: escalate and risk exposing himself, or retreat and lose the only leverage he has ever truly enjoyed. At the same time, Nick sets a second trap, a trap made of false certainty. He arranges for Matt to discover a route to cash and protection that looks too clean to be fake: an offshore lifeline, a beer willing to purchase stolen assets, a shadowy promise of a new identity. Nick knows Matt can't resist the fantasy of reinventing himself as untouchable again, and he knows that fantasy will lead Matt to a location, a meeting, a handoff. Nick doesn't need Sienna's exact address. He needs motion. Hostages are hardest to find when they are hidden and still. They become findable when the captor gets greedy, impatient, or arrogant enough to move them. Nick's plan is brutally simple. Make Matt believe he is about to win so completely that he takes a victory lap, and then ambush the moment he exposes what he is protecting. Noah, however, becomes the wild variable Nick cannot fully control, because fear has a way of turning love into recklessness. When Noah senses that Nick is playing a long game, he begins to unravel, convinced that time is running out faster than strategy can move. He starts to consider the kind of choices that terrify Sharon most: private deals, secret payments, acts that feel heroic in the moment but become crimes in hindsight. The more Noah imagines Sienna alone, cold, frightened, uncertain whether she will ever see daylight again, the more he feels his own identity collapsing. He isn't thinking like a Newman heir anymore. He is thinking like a man ready to burn his life down if it means pulling someone else out of the fire. That internal collapse becomes visible to the people who know him best. Sharon tries to anchor him with reason, with the reminder that panic is exactly what Matt wants, but Noah's mind keeps looping back to the same conclusion. If Matt believes Sienna is expendable, then every negotiation is a lie. Every promise is a trap, and the only real outcome is the one Noah forces with his own hands. Nick sees it too, and the fear of losing Sienna is suddenly matched by the fear of losing Noah to guilt and rage. That is when Victor Newman's shadow enters the story, not with warmth or comfort, but with the ruthless pragmatism that built the Newman empire in the first place. Victor does not view Matt as a problem to be negotiated. He views Matt as an infection to be cut out. The difference between Nick and Victor is not love, it is method. Nick wants a rescue that leaves Noah's soul intact. Victor wants an outcome that preserves the Newman name, regardless of what it costs in the dark. And while the Newman family circles this crisis, another storm brews nearby, one that threatens to collide with the kidnapping in the most catastrophic way possible. Jack Abbott's fragile attempt at moral clarity begins to crack under the pressure of Victor's ongoing sabotage. And Phyllis Summers remains the unpredictability Jack both craves and fears. The AI software becomes the silent third player in every conversation, because whoever controls it controls narratives, finances, surveillance, and public perception. Phyllis understands that better than anyone. She doesn't just want to steal technology, she wants to rewrite power. But the moment Jack senses that Phyllis may be playing a deeper game that could place the AI in hands he cannot trust, finds himself facing the same moral trap Nick is facing with Matt. Sometimes the fastest path to victory is also the path that makes you unrecognizable. The kidnapping of Sienna and the theft of AI begin to feel eerily connected, not because they share a culprit, but because they share a truth. Genoa City is entering an era where control is no longer about money alone. It is about information, leverage, and the ability to ruin someone with a whisper. That is why the next phase of Nick's plan becomes terrifyingly high stakes. He realizes that if Matt suspects the Newman family has resources beyond cash tools that can track, predict, and expose, Matt may decide to disappear entirely, taking Sienna with him as a human shield. So Nick accelerates the trap. He forces the honey to appear quickly, making Matt believe the window for escape is now. He lets Matt see a glimpse of an exit route so tempting it becomes irresistible. Then Nick prepares the most dangerous move of all. He steps into the role Matt expects him to play, the role of the desperate father willing to trade anything. Because once Matt believes in that performance, he will show his hand. The confrontation that follows is not loud at first. It begins with a meeting arranged under the illusion of safety, a place chosen to appear ordinary because ordinary places are where criminals feel invisible. Nick arrives with the controlled calm of a man who knows that the wrong emotion can get someone killed. Matt arrives with the smug certainty of a man who believes he's finally holding a Newman family by the throat. Nick offers Pathmony silence, the kind of deal that would let Matt vanish and live like a king somewhere no one can touch him. Matt tastes the fantasy and grows careless. He starts revealing details without realizing he is revealing them, not by speaking plainly, but by the way he references time, by the urgency in his demands, by the way he keeps checking for signals from someone else. Nick reads all of it like a map. And then the game turns violent. Not necessarily with fists, but with psychology. Nick pushes Matt toward a cliff edge of his own making by implying something that hits Matt's deepest insecurity, that even if he gets paid, he will still be nothing. Still be a footnote in the Newman story, still be the man who needed the Newmans to survive. That implication is like gasoline. Matt's need to matter flares, and in that flare, he makes the kind of mistake Nick has been hunting, moves too quickly, calls the wrong person, tries to relocate his leverage before it can be taken. Somewhere in that chain reaction, the location of Sienna's captivity becomes less protected than it has ever been, not because Nick suddenly becomes omniscient, but because Matt's arrogance forces the situation to change shape.